Hello and welcome. I'm your host, author Ryan M. Oliver, and this is the Mighty Books Podcast. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Books Podcast. Today's featured author is Grinnell Buzz Desjarlais. Hey Buzz, how you doing this morning?
Good, Ryan. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too. So we're here to talk about your book and your experiences. Can you tell us what the title of your book is?
The title of the book is Saving KC, initial K, initial C.
And what is this book about?
Well, it's a historical fiction, a novel, and it is actually in a way about Karen Carpenter, hence the KC.
Okay.
And some folks, Karen Carpenter passed away back in 1984 at 32 years old, and some people don't recall who she is. You probably don't.
I do not. So
And
yes.
she was the half of the Carpenters, and you still hear that music today.
Mhm.
She was definitely a very pure female vocalist, and passed away from anorexia and bulimia at the young age of 32. And then, of course, the act was gone away after that. I think they sold like 110 million records or something like that worldwide, toured worldwide, all that sort of stuff. She was actually, some consider, the very first superstar.
Huh. Oh, okay.
So, because their act was worldwide, they originated out of California. If you read the book, I tell people, do yourself a favor and research Karen Carpenter a little bit, all over the place, YouTube, Wikipedia, you can get a rundown. Several books have been written about her that are more factual than fiction. And so that's kind of what it's about. We don't use real names in a novel. We just kind of parallel the universe, these folks. We don't want to get in too much trouble, and we don't want to offend existing family members to an extent. So
No, that's true. That's true.
kind of what it's about was, and it's kind of like what is it? Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino thing. So he goes the Tate LaBianca murders, then he gets to a point and he just veers off.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
what we do with this.
Yeah. So based in reality to some degree, with maybe the main character being the
Yeah.
proponent there, the real
Yeah.
proponent. Everything
Yeah.
else kind of starts to twist on its head
Mhm.
for creative ventures and fun stuff like that.
That's, and I'm good at telling stories and writing BS. So that's, I get into that mode and away we go. So
You've got a doctorate in BS writing, in
I'm
BS.
I'm in construction, of course.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. You can spin a good yarn, as some would say. I know I've met a lot of good guys who are just great at telling awesome stories. Are they embellished? Probably. Are they funny? Absolutely. And that's the whole point most of the time of telling stories, just entertainment, man.
Yeah.
So I saw the setting of this book. Is it in post-American Vietnam? Is that a particularly important era for you?
Around the Vietnam era. And that's when this group was prevalent. Their first musical hit was in the summer of 1970.
Gotcha.
I was a new draftee in the U.S. Army.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be caught with the Carpenters album was sacrilegious.
Yeah.
Now, when all this other racy stuff was going on, and we'd have to get a Carpenters album and hide it under your mattress. So it just was not cool.
It just wasn't cool. Oh, weird.
So,
okay.
So it was that time, and probably the time in my life that is probably most memorable. And if we're nostalgic about things, of course, I'm a great believer, and I love nostalgia.
Oh yeah.
And most everyone does. If you hit the right button, people collapse.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes the tears start coming and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so basically what kind of kicked this thing off for me is about the beginning of the pandemic. we were essential workers and we were still going, but I was doing a lot of work from home and I was monkeying around with YouTube.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of a sucker for YouTube reaction videos for music. And so I'd started watching those things, and all of a sudden this came up, and I was thinking, God, whatever happened to her? Because I'd spent the formative part of my years, my early 20s and 30s, incapacitated, let's
Mm.
say. I was, a little bit of drink and a little bit of this and a little of that, and all going down the wrong direction, and all equals misspent youth. So, and I saw that group come up, and I thought, what the heck ever happened? Something about her dying early and young, and she was my first crush,
Uh,
my first female crush in the music industry. So I started digging into it, and I dug, the more I dug, and the books had written, and the materials and all that stuff. And it occurred to me, this is like the saddest story in the damn universe. How can anyone so innocent just be ripped apart by everything,
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
just ultimately ending her own life unintentionally, but still intentionally, and how that all went down and all that sort of thing. So I'm like that. I start pulling the string, and it leads someplace, and I pull some more strings, and then it impacted me in such an emotional way. I mean, it just like broke me down,
Yeah.
and
Interesting.
that's strange because guys like me usually don't do that. But here I
No.
am. So I do this and do that. And I was reading all these opinions and stuff. And God, what would it have been like if Karen Carpenter had lived? Wouldn't that, why did she die? All the stuff goes in. So I thought, what the, and I was kind of stuck. I
Yeah.
didn't know what to do with this. So I just started writing. And I tell my publisher, I'm not a writer. He said, you wrote a book, you're a writer.
Well, so yeah,
So
you just developed a story that you couldn't let go. So you had to
yeah,
write it. You had to put it somewhere.
and it had to get out of my head to paper. So I started monkeying with the doggone thing,
Yeah.
and it started to take shape a little more and a little more. And
Yeah.
I knew nothing of the publishing world, absolutely nothing. I
Sure.
knew that there were probably 4 or 5 major publishers in the United States or in the world,
Hmm.
and that the more I researched, the likelihood of getting picked up as a debut author on a novel,
Yeah.
the likelihood is like remote. It's like a million to one because you have to go get an agent, and the agent has to be able to sell you, and you go da 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 da.
Yeah. Potentially. Yeah.
So I thought, if I'm going to do something with this, I can't just write it, stuff it in the drawer, and leave it there. I mean, I'm emotionally hanging out all over the place. I'm in pieces here. So I started doing some research, and I learned and learned and learned. And I thought, I need a hybrid publisher. So
Yeah.
what that means is self-publishing, of course.
Hmm.
So I called around and studied, and I got a hold of this guy in Seattle, Classic Day Publishing, Peanut Butter Publishing too at the same
Oh,
time. I
okay.
thought that's kind of a dumb name. But I called the guy up. I got a hold of the guy who ran it. His name is Elliot Wolf. And I kind of laid my cards on the table, and he laid his cards on the table, and he said, it's going to cost you this much. If you're not willing to do that, then go sell shoes.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, the guys, that's a different story than I've heard from anybody in this business, because they've always been trying to tell me, oh yes, we can make you a hero, and we're going to make a movie out of it and sell Cadillacs and all that stuff. And I thought, well, I've been around a while, and I wasn't bored last night.
Yeah. If it sounds too good
So
to be true, it probably
yeah.
is. Yeah.
So this guy was like the only one who told me the truth. It was like, this is what you're facing. This is the deal. Da, 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 da. So I went ahead and got into a contract with him, and he was still a little bit like, we might have to call the game here at some point when this doesn't pan out and not working out. We'll talk about you bailing out and me, taking care of that, and we'll
Sure.
financially make it right and that sort of thing. So we went ahead. So odd things starts happening. So I had a few parts of this written. They wanted to see what I had, and then I gave them a little more, and I get a little more, and then the editor Danielle, she said, well, why don't you just close yourself in a room and finish this thing? You have
Right.
to finish this. So that's what I did. In the space of 3 months, really, the first manuscript was drawn. 3 months. And I tell people that, they go, what? It's been taking me 10 years. And I said, yeah, well, I had to get this out. It was torture.
Yeah. It's can be a pain. I mean, I had a similar thing where my book took me about 15 years because I didn't close off and just focus. You know,
Yeah.
life gets in the way, you're busy, but then
Mhm.
when you kind of get that spear point motivation, you
Mhm.
finally sit down and knock it out. It can take about 3 to 6 months of just solid work and boom, you've got something to deliver. But
Yeah. Yeah, it was very interesting because I'd closed myself off and I was dragging it in here to work, locking the door, and these guys are going, is he okay? What's wrong with him? Oh, should we be worried?
no, he's actually doing everything he should be doing. This is good for him. This is good for
And
him.
my
Give him time
and
to
my wife
reflect.
was the same way. Are you okay?
He's not really one to shut himself into things. It's like, that's strange.
So this thing got cranked out.
Yeah.
And then I was decompressing from the effort. And it was a very emotional thing for me. And I don't, it was a spiritual event for my life because I was at a crossroads. You know, we're in a secret anonymous program, AA,
Mhm.
and the spiritual aspect of that program never ends. It expands. It's not like a religious thing. You read the book and you're in the door and that's it. This demands that I look at all kinds of things as I grow in my program, and I look at what's called a spiritual program, not a
Right.
religious thing. So
Yeah.
I look at all kinds of different things, and I started getting into, and I still do, quantum physics, quantum reality and theory, because those are meaningful. Hell, I even study the stars. I'm into horoscope. Because there is science behind it.
Mhm.
And this astrologer that I use, she dragged out the ephemeris. And I said, I know what that is. I use that in the U.S. Army to do sunshots to line up artillery fire. So I said, I know what that is. A lot of these tie-ins. And then I got into, I'm probably going way down this goofy road with you. I don't
That's
know.
okay. That's fine.
Uh,
Goofy it up. It's all right.
years when I was probably about 10 years sober, and I was working for this construction outfit in Spokane, electrical contractor, and they were giving everyone the Myers-Briggs
Oh,
test,
yes. Yes.
and so I'm no different. We're all managers in here. We're tough guys, and we're in construction, all that
Yep.
sort of thing. So I took my test, and then the guy reviews the findings, and there's 16 types. And he says, "Well, you're an INFP," and I said, "Yeah, so was that?" He said, "Well, everybody else is up in these upper quadrants up here, and you're way down here in the lower left quadrant, and all this stuff." He's like, "What are you doing here?" He said, "You should be a priest, psychiatrist, or a doctor, or a writer, or an actor. What are you doing with this bunch?" I said, "Oh, that thing is just BS."
It's just, yeah.
I swept it off my plate, and I thought, yeah.
So it said you're
So,
like very sympathetic, is what it was saying. It was you're a very
well,
sympathetic person.
very sensitive.
Yeah.
The other side of my brain,
Yeah. The,
very. I think it would be left brain.
yeah. I can't remember. Very interpersonally minded.
Yeah, very introverted, and I am that. I can
Yeah.
get very quiet. Not so much anymore like I used to be, but
Yeah,
uh,
I feel like
kind of
it's a
that.
learned trait though. I mean, especially with you going in the army, you kind of have to, you are this core thing, but you can build and add things to make you
Uh,
fit into your environment better. I feel like that's kind of you building on top of your core self. You know what I mean?
So the point of the story is
Yeah.
kind of like that. So years later, I'm running this business, and so one of my colleagues out there in the world says, "Well, why don't you having your people do a Myers-Briggs?" And I said, "Oh, that's BS." He said, "How do you know?" And I said, I told him my experience. He said, "Do it again, see what you get."
Yeah.
So okay, so I did it again. It cost $20 or something like that. Turned out the very same way.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Funny.
what the hell is going on here anyway? Because this is all woo-woo crap. And in my spiritual journey in the Secret Anonymous program, here I am. I'm stuck in the religious thing still, the Judeo-Christian model of things. Even though when I came out of that model, very Jesuit centered, what we were driven into us on the reservation,
Mhm.
because that's where that all came from, and it was very abusive.
Yeah.
So I was still kind of stuck in it. So this stuff is like woo woo, and they're done
Hoity-toity woo-woo stuff. Yeah.
very same way.
Yeah.
And then I was talking to a couple of people about it that were good at this stuff. They said, "Well, you're one of those guys that's kind of rare. Your model is way down here in the left-hand corner of the whole event section of these 16 personality types. Yet you have been driving square pegs and round holes all your life,
Just make it fit.
and you've learned to adapt.
Yeah.
So you've adapted yourself to this logical center of management and this way of behaving,
Yeah.
but at your core, that's not you."
Hmm.
So here we go down the road with, and to me, that was a very spiritual awakening, another event in my life that told me something else is going on here.
Yeah.
Because then other people start saying, you know, you're a good writer, you're good at this stuff.
Yeah.
We don't know where you get this from.
It's a
Because
gift.
my publisher calls me up one day and he says, Elliot, he says, this is after the editor said him, well, actually made a call to him. He said, I don't ordinarily make calls like this. I just don't. He says, but Danielle wants to keep this whole thing longer, probably for another month or two to go through it to make sure that it's the best she can do.
Uh,
And she's called me in tears begging for more time on this thing. In tears? What happened?
you just go immediately to uh-oh.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, oh no. And then there's still that part of me that says, I think I'm sensing a little bit of Buick salesmanship here, and I'm
Oh
not
no.
not trusting that.
Yeah.
But he said, seriously, Buzz, just please let her have some more time. Oh, yeah, sure, fine. So then I kind of went about my business, and then this thing becomes more serious and more serious. Then it actually we move to it becomes a book.
Yeah.
We went through editing, probably took about a year to a year and a half
Whoa, that's a long
on
time to edit.
on rewrites
Okay.
and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But again, Danielle wanted to do a good job, so
Yeah.
that's kind of where that went.
Right.
It's being a novel, I've discovered, and having to do with feelings and people's feelings and those kinds of things that sometimes takes longer, and the conveyance of what the idea wants, the author wants, has to be kind of flushed out better, and
Okay.
things need to really be centered and line up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If we're just writing nonfiction and I'm just rolling out the case for whatever, it's all factual.
Right. Yeah.
Can
This
be
is
annotated and all that sort of stuff at the back few pages, but this is different.
yeah, a little more
So
yeah,
yeah,
like interpersonal kind of the
uh,
inner self. Yeah.
so that's what I've discovered about the thing, and so it went to print not too long after. So we deal with the book itself.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote it very oddly, strangely. I've never done this before.
No.
So what I did is I thought there has to be between the male protagonist. I took a native kid
Mm-hmm.
out of Montana off the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. He was raised up there. He was a horseman, a rancher, and a horse and cattle guy.
Yeah.
Raised by a rough father, him and his brother. And we have ourselves in these stories I've discovered later.
Mm-hmm.
But this book is all about me, and I don't know that.
Yeah, yeah. You put a lot of yourself into these stories and you
And
don't realize it until you read it. You're like,
yeah,
ah, there's some parallels here.
and as somebody pointed out, like, well, this is that, and this is that. Jesus Christ, many sakes! And I was trying to be a secret.
Secrets come
This
out, man.
the story starts coming out. So I had to figure out. I'm going to get this kid from Montana. I'm going to get him down to California,
Hmm.
down in California, where the Carpenters are from. They both went to college down there at Long Beach. So we get them all put together. This kid winds up with a gal that he's an Indian gal from the
Hmm.
Morongo Reservation down there, Southern California.
Okay.
They're planning to get married. I don't want to give away too much of the story, but enough to
Sure.
get
Oh yeah.
to whet people's appetites.
Yeah.
And so they are planning to get married and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, his mother dies back in Montana, throws him off track. He starts failing in school.
Yeah. Emotional
And pretty,
turmoil.
yeah, so pretty soon, and his father runs off to the hills because he can't take it.
Yeah,
So he's up in Glacier Park somewhere, hermiting out on the reservation,
sure.
hiding out. So he winds up exposing himself to the draft, and he winds up in Vietnam.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And as a result of that, he gets captured,
Hmm.
spends 3 years in captivity,
Oh,
brutalized, tortured, and broken.
yeah,
And one day he winds up getting rescued, and his betrothed has gone off and done something else. And
sure.
his family is kind of to the four winds. His brother, as far as he
Scattered.
knew, had become just a drunken drug user, and no one knows where he's at or anything. So he's kind of by himself.
Yeah.
So he winds up wandering in through a series of events. He winds up in LA Veterans Hospital, and he winds up being invited to a church in Downey. He spots a piano in there, and his mother has taught him how to play the piano during cold Montana winter. She was a white woman from back east,
Hmm.
and her story was interesting, how she wound up where she did. But anyway, that's part of the story.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, and she was a was almost a concert pianist. So she taught him how to play piano and music and do all this kind of stuff. So
Right.
he spotted a piano in that church, and he went into a side room and he started plunking away at this piano, playing a song. And then this voice comes in behind him and starts singing that song. And it's the other KC. And they both, interestingly enough, have the same set of initials.
Oh, very cool. Okay, I like this. This is good.
So she comes up behind him and starts singing,
Yeah.
and he's trying to play the piano, and he's just like void of emotion
Hmm.
because it was just like beaten out of him.
Yeah, he just that's how he
And
survived.
and so he just was like this emotionless thing.
Hmm.
But when she did that to him and laid a hand on his shoulder, because not having a female, particularly a female touch
Hmm.
and a tender female touch,
Yeah.
just triggered him, and he starts going.
Hmm.
And he starts emoting, playing his piano. The tears are falling on the keys and all this stuff.
And it's all about their kind of journey together.
Yeah, that's what kind of ignites that sort of a thing. So he
Yeah.
has this big. That's the first piece that I wrote.
Was this book starting as like a factual thing and then it became something just like to your own imagination and emotion? Did it start off as factual or did you
No,
know it
well,
was
it wasn't. It was never designed to be factual.
okay, okay.
And as I thought about it, that's what I described to you before is the
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino way
Yeah.
of doing business.
That whoop.
That's what I thought. I can't just do this because other people have already done that.
Yes,
They've
they
already
have.
plowed that ground and then the biography, autobiography, all that sort of stuff is
Exactly.
already done.
Exactly.
So I took those findings and those ideas that were
And you kind of cradle it in
yeah,
its own way.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
and then took that and then shot it to the moon.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So I used that centerpiece because I wanted to get the emotionality
Right, right, right.
from the core of the story in
Yeah.
that place. And just to have the interaction of those two protagonists, male,
Yeah.
female, and da da da, set that. So then I went back to the what I'd already started the beginnings of it, went back to that, wrote that to that from the beginning to the center, and
Yeah.
then from that centerpiece out to the end.
Yes. How long were your days when you were just sitting and writing and getting this out there? How long were you working on it
It's
per day?
more like, and I probably do like 8 or 10 hours. But I would still work during the day, and I would sneak time in during the day to do this, maybe about an hour. But
Yeah.
I'm a horrible night owl, and I'd go to like 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock sometimes in the morning, and then get
Yep.
about 3 hours sleep, and then go to work, and then that's kind of what I did. I described it as close encounters of the third kind,
Yeah.
and it's like the guy's throwing mud in his window. His wife is going crazy. What are you doing? Are you crazy? And he's building this thing in his living room, and it's like,
I just yeah, I have to do it. I'm so compulsed to do it. I can't.
yeah,
You're almost it's like a fire you just can't put out, man.
yeah.
I've been that too. Get up at 3 in the morning, work on it for 4 hours, take a break, go back to it for 2 hours. You just can't not. It's just that worm in your head you cannot get out.
Yeah,
You have to let it evolve and grow
yeah.
and
And these
that's the way to
things,
do it.
thing for me was what just very emotional. I mean, I would have to walk
Sound like
away.
it.
I'd go out into the kitchen and just break down. I
Wow.
mean, break down like, oh my
Wow.
God.
And you're like,
And
what is
and
wrong with me? Why
yeah,
am I doing this?
that's exactly the thinking.
Yeah.
And as I was finishing up the book, Karen Carpenter and her mother and her father are buried in Thousand Oaks, California.
Okay.
They have a what do you call them? Above
Oh,
ground
like a mausoleum kind of a
mausoleum, but
thing.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
and it's for the family. And so I we went down there, down to California and visited that area. My wife came with me, and I went to the site to visit because I wanted that emotional tie-in, and I was just exploring too at the same time.
Sure.
So I took some sage and sweet grass and did some praying and all that
Hmm.
stuff there and all that sort of thing. And then we get back up to this back home up here, and I went and saw my shrink right off the bat, and I said, I don't know what's going on with me. Something's wrong. And
Uh,
so I told her, I said, is it possible to fall in love with a dead person? She said, is anybody getting hurt? I said, maybe me a little bit. She said, I think you're okay.
yeah. Yeah, you idolize the person. So I mean, that's not a bad thing. And it
Yeah,
sounded like it
yeah,
was kind of pushing and pulling you through this kind of just time of maybe healing or growth or both at the
yeah,
same time. I mean, who the heck
yeah.
knows?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've talked to some people. Well,
Yeah.
you were probably being channeled. I said, what? Channeled? Some more woo stuff.
Oh, okay.
There we go. So
Yeah.
that started opening up that can a little wider on astrology, looking into that and looking into the other stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
Hmm.
All, of course, tying into quantum physics, quantum theory, quantum
Well,
reality.
with the quantum physics stuff, quantum entanglement, I mean,
Yeah,
if like so all this, like I know it really little, but the little bit I've studied, because I love astronomy. I've always loved astronomy and that kind of thing of just the stars and how it's all
yeah,
science interconnected. And it's just energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be
no,
moved and transformed.
yeah,
So that begs the question,
yeah,
are things from the beyond our perception connecting with us in ways we cannot interpret. And so
yeah,
that's where quantum physics kind of, I feel like, kind of goes beyond the veil a little bit. You know what I mean? And it's
yeah,
I can't explain any of this
yeah.
because I'm not nearly smart enough to articulate it, but it's
Well,
really cool.
no one really is. I
No, no,
mean,
it is.
it's like the great scientists say, if you think you understand it, you don't.
Exactly, exactly.
You don't because no one does.
No one
We
does.
can only make guesses at this point. And
Yes.
I've got all these books lined up, and then as I started going through these things, of course, I'm just a curious cat,
Yeah, same.
and I'll read a paragraph, and they're trying to describe, just trying to lay this thing out, and I'll have to stop and just really grind it out word by word and internalize it and make sense of it. And it's kind of like that. That's how we learn that stuff.
Yeah.
And eventually, word by word and sentence by sentence, you get a little bit better at maybe understanding what you don't understand.
And the older and
And
longer I live, the more stuff I learn, the more I realize I know nothing at all
uh,
compared
uh,
to what's out there. I mean, it's
and
super minor, tenth, millionths of a percent of information that I
uh,
have compared to what's out there.
and then people like me, we have. I'll talk a little bit about. I don't represent Alcoholics Anonymous in any way, shape, or form, and
Sure.
anything I say can be just thrown out the window because it's my opinion,
Right.
and that amounts to zip in that program. But what I've discovered is like there's the first 154 pages of that thing, 156 or how many pages.
Hmm.
It just kind of lays it out, and then the second part of that book is personal stories.
Hmm.
And as I think about this, it is like a manuscript that was written by two guys who don't belong unintended out in the backyard.
Uh-huh.
And where did this come from? How did they come up with this thing?
Right.
And someone once explained that God looked down, or the universe looked down and saw there was no hope for drugs. So they were just going to die of this thing.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, this thing comes on board, and
Right.
these two guys, like I said, don't belong unattended out in the backyard, write this wonderful thing. Where'd they get this from? So it has to be
Right.
like divinely inspired. And the thing that occurs to me after I've been studying that thing for 40 years is that all of these libraries full of wonderful books and writings by humankind
Hmm.
all over the world are contained within the first few pages of that book. Isn't that amazing? It's about forgiveness, about redemption, it's about wellness, sickness,
Hmm.
how we treat our fellow man,
Yeah.
how we mistreat ourselves.
Yeah.
And all these things are laid out there for and written in such a way that only a knucklehead like me could get. It's written right to me.
Yeah. Right to you. Yeah. Well, I
so
mean, to a lot of others too.
so that's very special.
Yeah.
And then the lights start coming on and these things start snapping into place, and you can call it woo all you want, but
At one point, you gotta think it's got to come from somewhere. There's got to be some base of reality into it.
uh,
It's not just woo woo all the
uh,
time. There's other things we believe in now we didn't think or we thought was woo woo years ago. So it's like
yeah.
we
And
just don't have enough evidence.
150 years ago, they'd burn you at the stake for talking about what you and I are talking about.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean,
So
yeah. It's ridiculous. So I
now,
mean, we know.
now we've got this war against quantum theory and classical physicists whose very job depends upon classical Newtonian physics.
Hmm.
Because if that's not their story, then they're on the wrong track, and they have been, and they could lose their
Oh my gosh, I
whatever.
know. Yeah, there's man, there's a lot of field of science like that. There's I think there's some historical archaeology, ancient archaeology and stuff like that. They're under kind of scrutiny for trying to change the narrative or trying to keep the narrative the same
Yeah,
because it's what we've been believing forever. It's like, well, can't we just explore different op like who was there? No one. No one was there. No one alive today was there. No one
yeah,
alive today experienced what we
yeah,
experienced 10,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. Yet, it's like, can we just explore this possibility and
yeah,
look for the evidence? It's like, it's okay.
yeah.
It's
And
okay.
then running behind all of this thing that I've discovered is that, because I was at war with the Catholic Church. I mean, I was.
Oh,
Wasn't going to cut them any slack because some bad deeds were done down through my family and whatever.
yeah,
So, in through this whole process of learning about myself and whatever else goes on in the world, I discovered that I had to forgive.
yeah,
But
yes,
but not just, I forgive you and walk off. It's
no,
like it has to be a very
internal.
intentional and meaningful
Yes,
place.
yes,
And not just with my parents, because we were at war too as well, because of this dynamic that was set up, pass it on and pass it back sort of thing,
sure.
being raised in abandonment and all that sort of stuff. But getting the actual forgiveness of that, but actually going deeper than that with institutional stuff and say, this has gone on long enough. And so I had some meaningful conversations with some folks,
Yeah,
and I've come to terms with that, and that's fine. And every once in a while, I'll slip in a Sunday mass, go to church because I like the ceremony of it all,
yeah,
and I like the feel of it all.
yeah,
And I held no grudges against the people that believe in that stuff because for them, that's the real sustaining thing in their life, and that's
right.
just where they're at. And
Yeah,
there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I can't call foul on that at all
no.
because they're good folks.
Yeah, yeah. It's in the intentionality of people. You have the actual system or the certain religious, or really just any belief system at all. Usually it's rooted, most of them are rooted in goodness, kindness, forgiveness, like you said, trusting your fellow man, loving thy neighbor. But people abuse that power, that knowledge for their own intentions, and that's where it gets I'm gonna say the word bastardized.
Yeah, well, and
And
we're humans,
we are.
and uh, property, prestige, and power are always playing in the background,
Absolutely.
and then ego run amok.
Oh my God,
And
yes.
I was listening to this one podcast or something where the guy was talking about his association with Tibetan monks and all this sort of stuff,
Hmm.
and yogis. And his statement was something like, somewhere in the world right now, there's a yogi levitating 3 feet off the ground, but he's not going to tell you, and he's not going to let anybody know because the reason he can do that is he's absolutely pure of ego. So he can do that. But somewhere that's happening. And that's the lesson is the more we free ourselves from ego, the more, the more pure we can get.
Absolutely. Ego
And
and pride getting away a lot.
some of those people get pretty close to nirvana doing that sort of thing. And which again leads to the other part of this whole thing is reincarnation for me.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay.
Because if you talked about reincarnation to a good Catholic, they go, "Oh, no, 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 there's heaven and hell."
Right.
And that's
Right.
okay. And again, that's okay. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. And
Yeah.
I was there for a long, long
Mhm.
time. And it's interesting how I was kind of led down that road a little bit. I was probably 4 years sober, and there were a group of us in Spokane, Washington, that started a nonprofit, an outpatient treatment for Native kids who had wound up in the urban setting off the reservations that were nearby because they come there for economic reasons, and then they wind up with these issues of alcohol and drugs and stuff. So
Right.
there was really no treatment modality for those kids because they were raised culturally a different way.
Hmm.
So we started this little program, and then we got a building, and it grew from there. And actually, we had a pilot program from the federal government
Hmm.
that had money into this thing. We managed to get a building and do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And this at one point we were having a summer camp, and
Hmm.
so I I had researched this thing about tribes and natives with drink and drug, and there was this little tribe out of Canada called the Alkali Lake Band, and there was this video put out by whomever did that, somebody out of Canada, and from a group that was 100% alcohol affected.
Hmm.
I mean, everybody in the band was drunk,
Hmm.
including the leader of the pack.
Hmm.
Him and his wife were drunk and drug affected. And finally, one day he had enough, and so he went to the next town and he discovered the secret anonymous operation.
Yeah.
And so he started getting involved with that. Pretty soon, his wife came on board, and they started one thing led to another. And I think 5 or 6 years down the line, the entire the entire band was sober. 100,
Wow.
100% sobriety. There's still an old thing called the honor of all, and I think it still exists somewhere in YouTube or something. You can find that, and it unfolds that story. That's very moving. And so I got a hold of the guy. His name was Andy Chelsea, and I'm sure he's passed on by now. And invited him. We wanted to bring him down so he could talk to our kids at summer camp.
Yeah.
Talk about this whole thing. He agreed. And so
Good.
I went to the airport that one day, picked him up. We stopped for lunch, and as we got out of the truck, he pulled this book out of his back pocket and started waving it at me. Reincarnation. Buzz, this is it. This is the thing. I found it. I found it. And I thought, oh my God. I was thinking I was inwardly rolling my eyes, thinking, oh, I picked up some nutcase woo-woo job. Oh God, here we go.
Yeah.
So and then he started talking about it. We were very excited about it, very animated and excited about it. And
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna say anything bad about it.
No, 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 no.
So I just thought, yeah. And isn't it interesting? All these years later, here I am. Like, hey, that's the thing. And I think about Andy Chelsea, and so I'm a believer in a lot of things, and maybe not even a believer. More to me, it's more like a knowing.
Hmm.
I've established the knowing. I know that this is this, and I
Yeah.
know that this is that.
Hmm.
And it's okay for you to not know it. That's fine. That's just where you're at.
Right.
That's just where you're at. And
Self-discovery.
we grow at different levels in different ways, and I think and a guy like me, I think that we come here, and I still sponsor a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and take meetings into the jailhouses around here.
Oh yeah, yeah, I saw that. You brought, did you say you brought it to the jailhouses?
We do. There's a group of us that volunteers. We cycle out through each week of the month, and we take
Okay.
different assigned times. And at one point in time, I was in the prison system for Washington State, taking meetings into those systems too.
Okay.
I spent 10 years doing that. That was not my intention going in there. I had a sponsor that dared me to do it. And I said, oh, yeah, oh, okay, I could take my wisdom and courage in there and show them guys how to get sober and da da, so full of ego and pompous ass sort of behavior.
Yeah.
I went to my first meeting, and you have to clearance and all this stuff. It takes about 6 months to clear. And I finally got into my first meeting in there. And after the meeting, I went out to my truck in the parking lot and just bawled. It's like, Jesus Christ, man, you thought you knew this, and you knew nothing. It's things like that. So, and I tell folks that, you get to a certain part in these steps where there's bad behavior we have to address, and how we
Yeah.
do that sort of thing. And it's a character defect, and those kinds of things go on. So we have the conversation, well, maybe it's not a character defect. In my experience, what I'm discovering is that I think we come here with certain built-in features by the creator or whatever this wonderful universe consists of. I wind up here with certain built-in qualities. And then right as soon as I get here and my eyes open, the world starts working on me and starts the business of corrupting some of those things. And then I help it along by doing bad things to myself. And then that gets worse and worse and worse until I just absolutely fail and can't move anymore. Anything that was a good quality is either completely gone, or it's been so corrupted it's turned into something bad.
Right.
And then when we start rebuilding things, these things start coming up. And maybe, because you think this way and you behave this way, maybe it's a good thing that's trying to come out, and you just can't see it for that yet.
And when you get to the end of that tunnel, you are now what we would call a wise human, because you've come into the world innocent with all this circuitry, and then the world has either corrupted you or corrected you, and you have learned either way which one works and is the better one. So now you can be the wise one for the young people coming up in this world.
So yeah, so it's like these things that we viewed as a character defect, maybe they're not character defect, and maybe you're a person like me who got shamed into thinking that I was not the actor, the writer,
Right.
those other kinds of psychiatrist or the priest. No, I'm not. So we go about driving square pegs into round holes because we're raised by a man that says, ooh, 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 that's BS. Men don't cry, men don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we wind up doing this rough and tumble tough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the very essence of what we got here with just gets lost.
Yeah.
But at some level, spiritually, if we grow to a level, that stuff wants to get out.
Yeah.
And that's what I've described to you.
Mm-hmm.
This thing wants out.
Yeah. This true self, this true part of you needs to be seen.
Here it comes. And it ain't easy.
There's going to be some pain, but it's going to be worth it in the end. It's going to hurt because it's going against how many years of conditioning, But man, that's cool. That's quite the journey from the beginning to the end of this, where you're at now.
So this book is like an amalgamation of everything.
Yeah,
that's
sounds like
taken
it.
place. And see, I don't know that, and you can't see it until someone points it out.
Yeah. Yeah, you're too close to it. You can't see the forest through the trees at this point in time. Yeah.
And that's kind of why we have, in the world I'm in, why we have sponsors that help us out. I call it the Jethro Gibbs head slap.
We call that the Denozo slap.
You get slapped up beside the head.
Yep.
And it's not only your the person that's trying to offer you guidance, but it's also the universe, because that's where that comes from.
Yeah, kind of like the bowling alley, the bumpers in the bowling alley is kind of keeping you centered,
Yeah, or it's calling your attention to something, and
yes,
it pops you on the head, and then you
like,
first of all, it hurt. Leave it alone. Leave it alone.
Yeah, like, he keeps slapping me.
The second one comes along, and it's like gets a little more serious, and finally the third one comes along, and there's no avoiding it. Something's up, and it's either driving you to your knees or driving you to a direction that you're supposed to be in.
Yes.
And when we feel that pain, obviously, that's the resistance to that thing
Hmm.
because it's causing that emotional friction, and that hurts. And it's the belief system is being challenged. Everything that we've ever became out of our life is being challenged,
Right.
and we don't want to believe it, but
Hmm.
there it is. And then the facts start revealing themselves to a guy like me. It's like, oh, okay, all right, okay, I'm not going to fight this. I'm just kind of roll with the flow
Yeah. Roll with
and
the punches.
see where it takes me. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like that.
Yeah. We try to control everything as people, and we can't. It's just
Yeah,
not how it
well, there's
goes.
and those of us who are recovering from all these things, we obviously we all have control issues because
Oh
and
yeah.
we see that and with the Karen Carpenter as a
Hmm.
prime example is someone that the dynamic and the psychology of an anorexic
Hmm.
is much the
Oh,
same of an alcoholic.
trying to
You
control her
know,
body at least, or trying to
yeah,
control
that's the
what's
whole
coming
idea.
in. Yeah.
They can control their body. They can't control the music industry. They can't control dear old mom, who's very provincial and demanding,
Yeah.
and a checked out father, and a brother who's kind of waffling in between.
Right.
And the way that whole dynamic was built with that family,
Yeah.
they actually moved out of New Haven, Connecticut at a very young age. She was
Okay.
brought over with her brother, but they moved across country for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
The dad wanted to get to a warmer climate. He could not stand cold weather or snow, so he got sick of it. So he wanted to head to California. Plus, the prodigy was Richard, the son. He was a piano player. He would lock himself in the basement, learn piano, did all these wonderful things. He was just, kind of a musical savant. So everything in terms of success was all geared toward him. He was going to be the driver of success if they ever reached a point.
Yeah.
So she was just a tag along. And, he
Okay.
got involved and had a band, created a band and music, and she went to took musical stuff because she didn't want to go to gym class. But she was kind of in the background and she was doing a little backup vocal for the group. And then she decided she liked to play the drums. So she started playing drums and became quite good. And in fact, she was known more for her drumming than anything else at one point in time. And until they were in a session and they asked her to do backup. She did backup. Then they adjusted, go down a little bit, go down a little bit. And pretty soon this voice came out. Like everybody goes, what was that? What was that thing?
Where'd that come from?
So yeah, and it was kind of interesting because suspicions are that the record contract that they got with A&M Records at the time, who was like Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss.
Okay.
A&M Records back then in the 70s had all the major, but this only followed after the Carpenters became very successful.
Oh, okay.
That was like their lead punch. They had this one hit song,
Mhm.
and it just went to number one, went all over the place. And then A&M Records started collecting all of these artists, and they were good managers in the music industry. They were known as good managers and good owners. So a lot of people flocked to them. But the Carpenter primarily signed up, I do believe, and have after all I've read and understand, on the strength of her vocals.
Oh,
And
okay.
the brother became kind of like an add-on that just kind of tagged along. But to the mother and the father, the brother was responsible for all the stuff. And make no mistake, an excellent arranger
Hmm.
and musician and knew all of these things. And he's still today, he writes and conducts and does music, and
Oh, okay.
he's very talented and very good at it. So you can't take anything away from him. But the
Yeah.
interesting part is what drove the whole thing is this voice that came out, sang all these wonderful songs. And the mother was just unwilling to offer any sort of recognition to the daughter, very begrudging,
Mm.
like, yeah. So that's the dynamic that sets that up with girls,
That's hard. That's
is
hard.
that relationship with mothers that don't accept them like they need to be
Yeah.
accepted
Yeah. See her for
as
her instead
Yeah.
of like, oh, you're this way because your brother is
Yeah,
this way.
yeah. So that's playing
Yeah.
into it. Plus, all it took was somebody in Variety or something to say, the chubby sister. Well, she was a little chubby when she first started out. Then she lost some weight, and at one point she was just absolutely beautiful. And then, of course, through the consequent years, she went down to like 80 friggin' pounds or
Oh
something
my
like that.
God.
And had
So light.
pictures
Yeah.
of her, and then she was in a hospital and fainted and
Uh,
fell and did all these things. But
no, that's terrible.
at that time in the 80s, there was
Yeah.
probably, I discovered there was probably one person, because obviously we have to do a little bit of research in this stuff.
Yeah, well,
So,
definitely figured you did.
so how do these two get together emotionally? What's the tie that binds?
Hmm.
And we discovered that anorexia, you got to start doing something, and with alcoholism, you got to stop doing something.
Hmm.
But either one to the extreme will kill you.
Yes. Everything in
So
moderation.
no one ever realized that either. In fact, when Karen Carpenter passed away, you can research it a little bit. It was like, what? What the
Yeah.
heck is that?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, to see even like in '84 when that happened,
Hmm.
'83, it was just an unknown thing, and that was the era of a famous person from Britain called Twiggy.
Hmm.
And she was like rail bone thin all the time, skinnier than hell, and all the girls wanted to be like Twiggy.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, Twiggy is still alive. So go figure.
Go figure. Yeah. Well, so what kind of when did the book come out?
It was actually two, it came out in 2022,
Okay.
and then I rewrote the ending.
Oh, okay. I saw it
Uh,
had an alternate ending on theirs.
and it's the alternate ending in my mind that should have always been,
Okay.
but I didn't have the guts to do it.
Oh, okay.
Does
Okay.
that sound weird or odd?
I'm not really. I mean, the endings are the hardest thing, man. They're
Yeah.
just they're rough. So,
So I rewrote the ending and put it out again. And so it's coming out again in 24, here, late 24, early
okay.
25.
Sure.
It has the alternate ending in Audible. It's there.
Okay.
It has actually Audible has both endings, and
Ooh.
the ebook in Amazon has both endings.
Okay.
A little confusion with the publisher. We have two books. One's the original, one's the alternate, but we're supposed to create one that had both. So I went back again and created a third iteration. It has both
Oh.
endings in it, so everybody can be happy. And my publicist is angry with me.
Oh.
She had
Yeah.
set the stage and the table and the silverware for a date, and that just kind of got messed up. So
Yeah.
it's kind of in schizophrenia land right now, but uh, we've got it straightened out, and now we're all
That's
going to get
good.
in the clown car and go be a big success.
Good. As you should, as you should. So, where can people then go get Saving Casey if they're interested in reading it?
Right now, a little bit of trouble getting hard copies on Amazon because of the confusion that I've created. But you can go
Okay.
to the website.
Okay.
There is a website, www.savingkcthestory.com. That's Saving Casey, initial K, initial C, the story.com. And it's popping up in different places on Facebook and this and that. And, we'll see where all this goes.
Yes, yes, we will. Well, cool. Well, Buzz, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on here and chatting about your experience with writing a book, the inspiration, the actual story itself, and good conversation. Even dipping into some quantum physics there, which was completely unexpected. I did not expect to talk about it at all. But this has been very great. And future reference, if you want to come back, if you're doing any more writing, I know you said you want to
We
get
will.
into
I
some
am.
writing, which is awesome. If you got some more stuff coming out, call me up, touch base, and we'll make this happen again.
We'll do it. We'll do it, Ryan. And thanks for the opportunity. It's been great.
My pleasure, my pleasure. All right, guys, please go support Buzz. That's his nickname, Buzz, but Grinnell Desjarlais for his book, Saving Casey. I hope you guys really enjoyed this conversation. Have a great rest of your day. And as always, stay mighty and keep reading.